Hello and welcome. In our practices, we see this all the time. Clients who, by every single external measure, are knocking it out of the park. But internally, they're living with this constant gnawing feeling that they're a total fraud. So in this review, we're going to really break this down, peeling back the layers from the surface level symptoms right down to the core dynamics at play. Let's dive in. So let's start with a face that I'm sure is familiar to all of us in the office. It's the client presenting with what we might call high-functioning anxiety. On the outside, they're hitting their deadlines, they're getting promotions, they have this polished, perfect exterior, but the internal cost of keeping all that up is just immense. And this is where we see that huge disconnect. Externally, the client looks totally calm, completely confident, super put together. They smile, they're punctual, they get everything done. But their internal reality, it's a nonstop storm of worry, of overthinking every little thing, a mind that's just racing and can never, ever relax, even when things seem to be going perfectly right. This quote really just nails the experience, doesn't it? Our client is shouldering this incredibly heavy, hidden burden. They are burning so much energy, not just to achieve things, but to hide the struggle that comes with that achievement. And this constant performance of being okay, of being competent, is not only exhausting, it completely isolates them from any real, genuine connection. Okay, so what is the actual nature of this internal fight? When we zoom in, that high-functioning anxiety is often just a cover for a really specific and destructive cognitive pattern, what psychologist Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes first called the imposter phenomenon. At its core, imposter syndrome is this deep-seated, gut-level belief that you are a phony. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have, how many promotions, or how much positive feedback you get. The person feels like they've just managed to trick everybody. The core fear isn't just about failing. It's about being exposed. That horrible moment when everyone will finally see that they don't actually belong. And this feeling is kept alive by this vicious, self-perpetuating cycle. Here's how it works. It all starts when a new task comes up, something related to achievement, and it triggers this intense anxiety. That anxiety then leads to one of two things, either frantic, obsessive over-preparation or just paralyzing procrastination. Then, when the task is done successfully, there's maybe a quick moment of relief, but the success is immediately explained away. It was just luck. Or it's because they worked 10 times harder than anyone else needed to. And here's the kicker. The feeling of being a fraud actually gets stronger, which just sets them up for even more anxiety the next time around. Now, to really understand where this cycle comes from, we have to go deeper than just looking at cognitive patterns. We can actually frame this entire dynamic through a psychoanalytic lens, specifically using D.W. Winnicott's incredible concept of the true and false self. You see, that feeling of being an imposter, that nagging voice, it's not just some random negative thought. It's actually the voice of the false self. And the false self is this carefully built persona designed for one main job, to protect the vulnerable, authentic core of who we are from what it perceives as threats of rejection or being taken advantage of. So, what's the true self? Well, Winnicott saw it as the part of us that comes from our most spontaneous, gut-level gestures. It's that feeling of being real, of being alive, of being creative without even thinking about it. And it develops when a baby's authentic expressions are seen and celebrated by a caregiver, which builds this foundation of, hey, it's okay to just be me. The false self, on the other hand, develops when that validation just isn't there. The child learns, okay, to be safe, to be accepted, I have to push down my own real feelings and just comply with what everyone else wants. It becomes a mask of being agreeable, of achieving. But behind that mask, the person can feel totally disconnected, empty, and even dead inside. When you put these two side by side, the clinical picture becomes crystal clear. The true self is spontaneous and real. The false self is compliant and perfectionistic. The true self feels alive. The false self carries this constant feeling of emptiness. Our client who's experiencing imposter syndrome is living almost entirely from their false self, constantly performing, constantly complying, but never feeling like the success is theirs, because in their mind, they weren't the one who actually earned it. So this is the dynamic. But how do we actually help our clients bridge this huge gap? Well, while the roots might be psychoanalytic, one of our most effective tools for intervention is actually cognitive. We have to go in and address the thought patterns that are basically the scaffolding holding that false self up.
This is where something like cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, becomes so powerful. It gives us a structured, evidence-based way to help clients first become aware of and then ultimately rewrite those automatic thoughts that keep the imposter cycle spinning. It's all about making the unconscious conscious and then actively stepping in to change it.
And clinically, there are a few key cognitive distortions you're going to hear over and over again with these clients. You've got all or nothing thinking, where if it's not a perfect A+ success, it's a complete F- failure. There's discounting the positive, where any accomplishment is immediately written off as luck. You'll hear mind reading, where they're absolutely sure others are judging them. And of course, catastrophizing, where they expect to be exposed as a fraud around every single corner. So, a really practical CBT exercise we can use in session can follow these 4 steps. First, you help the client name the specific thought, something like, I only got this job because they like me, not because I'm actually qualified. Second, you become a detective together and you gather objective evidence both for and against that thought. Third, you work with them to build a new, more balanced, more realistic thought. And finally, and this is crucial, you translate that new thought into a small action, a little behavioral experiment that helps reinforce the more adaptive way of thinking. But at the end of the day, our work here isn't just about managing symptoms, is it? It's not just about silencing that inner critic. The much deeper therapeutic goal is to guide our client on a journey away from that exhausting false self and toward a reunion with their authentic core. This requires a really fundamental shift in perspective. You see, the false self is always trying to fit in, to become a chameleon, to meet whatever the external demands are. The true self, though, it's searching for belonging. And real belonging isn't about being liked by everyone. It's about being anchored in your own authentic experience. The goal is belonging to oneself, first and foremost. I find this quote so incredibly helpful for this work. That feeling of being an outsider, of being an imposter, it's a direct result of self-abandonment. For years, the client has been abandoning their own needs, their own feelings, their own spontaneous self in exchange for what they thought was safety and approval. Our therapeutic task is to help them reverse that entire process. And so that really leaves us with the central question that guides all of our work, doesn't it? How do we help our clients finally put down that heavy backpack of proving and perfecting and performing? How do we create a space in therapy that's safe enough for the true self to finally emerge, not as something broken that needs to be fixed, but as something that can finally be welcomed home? Thank you.